Manipulation. I don't think anybody I know has communicated to me that they want to be manipulated. They want to be swindled or want to be persuaded into something they ultimately do not want. There's a reason. There's a phrase, buyer's remorse. It's because it's this experience where you buy something that you really did not want. I remember, I take it back to when I was in high school. I believe I remember walking in, and it was the Kirby vacuum guy began talking to my mom, and they began having a conversation about buying the vacuum. But my mom at the time, I felt like we really couldn't afford it. Yet, the guy was in there vacuuming our carpet and comparing our current vacuum to the prior vacuum, and ultimately the dude somehow, some way, had convinced my mom to purchase this overpriced vacuum. So I mentioned that in this case is because what I know is that I don't think anybody wants to be manipulated. And what I hope to do today as we have this conversation, this is a class I've taught a number of times to professionals who are aiming to up their game from a marketing perspective. Yet I figured we would come in this class and look at it from another perspective, as opposed to thinking about it as how can you be more persuasive in the marketplace? How can your business grow and thrive? It's more of how can you be on the defense against some of those things. This might be for the person who's trying to get a hold of their finances and their expenses, and they're trying not to spend as much money, and they're aiming to say no more than say yes. This also applies. This would be some of the advice or insight that I would even give to my younger sisters or to a younger friend who's thinking about how to make wiser life choices. What are some of those principles that will set them up for success that I would give them so they're not manipulated by people that they meet, that they interact with, whether it's other groups or companies or organizations. And what it began to hit me about the content of this lesson stronger than almost anything was that many people can attest to the power of these principles that are shown all around us throughout our days. And even to begin to illustrate this even slightly, the example I'll share is all of the brands that are already using these principles. If you imagine these major brands, the brands I put right here on the thumbnail, I'll pull that up for us real quick. So the brands I put right here on the thumbnail, you have Apple, Starbucks, Netflix, Amazon, Ford, and truly I could go on and on about the number of brands that use these same marketing tactics or principles to help increase the likelihood of the customer buying their product, program, or service. And even when you pull up, if you Googled the motivational speakers, and you know what, we'll go ahead and do that right now. We're going to have a lot more of that on this stream. If you Googled motivational speakers, what you would get is you would get three big names to start. So let's go ahead and get that pulled up, and we'll be able to take a look at that here. Okay, so if we went to Google and we just put motivational speaker, and what if we just put that? All right, so here we go. So you had Tony Robbins, you have Eric Thomas, you have Les Brown. So think about Eric Thomas and Tony Robbins for a second as you think through these, again, some of these elite motivational speakers. One of the principles that I'm getting at, as even these guys, you could go read their market copy. Like, so let's say if, Eric Thomas had an event in Chicago a couple of weeks ago, and if you were to go read his market copy and see what he was pushing from the context of how he was trying to motivate or persuade people to come, you would be able to see him leveraging these same principles. Let me make sure that I did this fully correctly with this stream, because I did a little something unique this time around. Make sure I did that right. Okay, we did. All right. Yeah, I think we are set. And live and going. Okay, perfect. All right. So I tried a new functionality today. I'm not sure if it was as effective as I hoped, but we'll rock with it regardless. All right. So where we're at right now is, let's get to point number 1, and we'll move through. Again, how do you have that defense against psychological persuasion? If you understand fundamentally that these big corporations that might have $1 million marketing departments, and the tactics they use are the same tactics other people can use, and they're the same tactics you could actually provide a defense against. If you're aware of those tactics, you could be less prone to be manipulated by those tactics. So let's look into this. So I'll give you an example. So point number 1 is reciprocity. And reciprocity is it's a principle, and the way you're mindful of this is you be wary of the free lunch or the free offering. When you think through something free, understanding fundamentally that there's no such thing as free. Then the psychology behind this, you get into all of the psychology, and this all comes from the book Influence by Robert Cialdini. And I want to show you even the impact that his one book has had in the selling space across a few different areas on the Amazon bestsellers. So if you go over to Amazon, and I'm going to do that now with all of you. So I'm going to put influence. So let me make sure you're able to see all this. There we go. All right. So I'm over here on Amazon. I'm going to influence Robert Cialdini. Choose his name here. And which one do we want to look at? So his books almost always are in the best-selling department in a couple of different categories. So let's look at this. This one has 9,000 reviews, over 9,000 reviews. And what I'm most interested in right now is the ranking that his books have. So, okay, check this out. So we're in this section here. Let me make sure you all can see that. Okay, so there's this section right here I'm going to be choosing. It's called the bestsellers rank. It's number 23 in marketing and consumer behavior. So I'm going to click on that, and we're going to see a couple of things pop up. So remember, the version we just looked at was number 23. Now Persuasion, his other book, is number 23. But what we're going to see here in a second is that two of his, look at these two books right here, the Audible and then the updated book here. They're number 1 and number 2 in marketing and consumer behavior. Why am I showing you this? Because this is the book. The 6 principles I'm going to share today are from his book, and they're used again by Apple, Starbucks, Netflix, Hulu, Ford, and many, many other companies use the same principles. Okay, so this is under marketing and consumer behavior. I'm going to click on selling to see what are the top books in selling. Usually it's among the top in selling as well. All right. So not currently in top 50. All right, let's look at a few other. So we have marketing. So we were just looking at marketing and consumer behavior. Now we're gonna look at marketing by itself. Let's see how it ranks over there. Usually it's among the top 50 marketing books, but maybe it popped out. I know, again, it was top 2 in marketing and consumer behavior. So maybe no longer killing it on multiple fronts. If so, power to the other sales books. Let me look on page 2 just to double check. I wonder if something changed. And naturally, these rankings will change, but usually, I'm telling you, there's like 3 to 4 categories where every time I would pull up his books, I would see them in the top. Well, regardless, he has the number 1, number 2 spot in marketing and consumer behavior. We saw that on those other 2. So anyway, all of this to say, very, very successful, very, very practical principles that we're going to go over. We pulled up the principle of reciprocity, and ultimately the question, if you were aiming to influence the market on their side, they're asking, how can I give to the consumer or the potential consumer to convert them into a consumer? How can they become a patron of mine? How can they come on board? And if you're aware of that question, you could be aware of if somebody's trying to give you something for free. That's why there's the expression of you don't take candy from a stranger, right? Like, and it's the same idea. So I'll give you an example. I took note of a Jay Shetty. He was doing some form of class and it was free. It's okay. So it's a pretty normal business behavior to put it on a free event to add value, and to have some form of ask happen later on in the line. In the 48 Laws of Power, you also see in Robert Greene's book, he also says to despise the free lunch. Anything worthwhile is worth paying for. Again, this is when you get into the psychological component of this ultimately is that you're psychologically wired to want to give back to those who have given to you. So the way you guard yourself when it comes to being mindful and not succumbing to the advances of others who are trying to manipulate you and take advantage of you is to not just say yes to anything that's free, because in some ways you're opening yourself up to be psychologically persuaded and motivated by the other person. So now the goal isn't to be overly skeptical and to be somebody who is never trusting and never able to accept any good thing from any person. It doesn't mean to never be served. It doesn't mean to never receive anything, but to put on the awareness of, I have the awareness of when I accept a gift or something for free, I have the awareness that I'm wired to be psychologically motivated to want to give back to this person, this entity, this organization who has given to me. One of the reasons I encourage people to be on the giving side of every single one of their relationships, if they can, to outgive in all of their relationships, if at all possible, is because it does put you in a position to not be manipulated, where you're in a position where you can do the influencing, you to be persuading. But fundamentally, I believe generosity as a value and serving as a value, even outside of it, even if it didn't make me more influential, but it just does. So if you know that, if you're trying to become more influential, that giving and being on the giving side of the equation, maybe we could just even draw this out if my system is working well for us to be able to do it. Let's see. Let's see if it lets us. All right, let's try it out. Okay, a little. So the goal is in each friendship, each relationship, to be on the more giving side. So if you list it out, maybe before we even get into this, if you listed out your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors, your family, you want to be somebody who's giving. And that's going to help you to, again, to not be manipulated. Hey, well, I'm giving in this relationship. I'm giving in this partnership. I'm giving. And it's gonna best set you up for success in life in general, but also to not be manipulated. So the idea is to be the giving, to serve, to give. So anyway, so you take that principle and you use that, and you're just aware of it. You're aware of it. If somebody's giving you something for free, they might want something in return, even if it's not immediately obvious. You're just aware of it. It doesn't mean every person who always gives to you is always trying to manipulate you, but it does mean they potentially are, and they might want something, especially with companies. Again, they want your service, right? So they're trying to win your loyalty. They'll win your loyalty by giving to you. Okay, let's get into point number 2. And this one is the one we'll actually draw out. So this one is the principle of consistency. And in consistency, it's significant to think through, or to be aware that if you say yes to something smaller, it increases the likelihood of you saying yes to something bigger. So if we were gonna maybe start with maybe a small, tiny commitment, right? So let's say this is going on a date, right? So let's put the word date right there. And the word date is right there. And maybe it's something very, very small. And then maybe something a little bit bigger would be dating exclusively. So that's the boyfriend, girlfriend, all of that. And then later on, a little bit bigger of a commitment. Maybe I'll do that one again because and maybe we'll call this one engaged. And then this one, biggest one of them all. So would this be marriage? Let's see if I can fit that in. Marriage. All right. So we have a couple of illustrations on the smallest, tiniest commitment is dating. The next commitment up is dating exclusively. Is going on one. So the first one is one date, then it's dating exclusively, then it's being engaged, and then it's getting married. So the principle of consistency is you first focus on getting a yes or a buy-in or an opt-in to something smaller before you make an ask for something bigger. Concept would be this idea of not getting married on the first date or not asking for marriage on the first date. So typically, not always, but very often, you start with the date. Somebody asks for a date, and then maybe later on it's exclusively, boyfriend and girlfriend, and then maybe later on after that it's getting engaged, and then maybe after that it's getting married. All of this to say, again, if I was talking to my younger sisters, or if I was talking to my friends who were coming up and they were trying not to end up in a sad situation or a troublesome situation. And my advice to them with this principle in mind, considering the illustration we just created, it would be, don't say yes to a date with someone, especially if you don't see yourself in a longer term relationship with them. Because if you say yes to a date, you're more likely to at some point or another become exclusive boyfriend and girlfriend with them. And if you say yes to being exclusive boyfriend and girlfriend with them, you're that much closer and that much more likely to say yes to being engaged and engaged into marriage. So we're saying all of this is when it comes to manipulation in this principle where you could be manipulated by saying yes to something smaller that leads to something bigger. And this applies in business. There's, I mean, in Facebook, there's Facebook groups that do this. That's like, hey, you get into the Facebook group and then you add value, and then later on you aim to convert them into a paid client. There's so many ways that this can be done. And by the way, to be clear, I'm not even saying any of this is evil, or I'm not even saying this is evil or wrong. What I am saying is that if you're aware of these principles, I encourage anybody who knows the principles to use them ethically, to use them with honor, to use them with respect, to use them with consideration, all those things. But if you don't know the principles, that's often when you're most likely to be manipulated from them. Let me see here. Oh, I figured out why my color was messing up earlier, because the opacity was on. Okay, let me draw another illustration for the same principle to kind of flesh some of this out. Okay, so sometimes so if you understand that smaller commitments lead to bigger commitments, I think we all understand that fundamentally. Then it's also important, sometimes a business, if I was working with a business and let's say they weren't getting many conversions in their paid clients, and I would literally walk them through the 6 principles we're looking at today. And in this principle, we would look at what I consider the onboarding ramp to the highway. So let's go ahead and draw again. We have, this is going to be some kind of car is where I'm going with this, just so we're all in the clear. Not that I'm much of an artist, but we try, I guess. So yeah, so it's struggling, but yeah, so it's supposed to be a car. All right. So we have the car in my left hand corner, and what the car's goal is to get on an onboarding ramp. So, but let's say the onboarding ramp looked like this. Then you could see the car is not going to be traveling up vertically. It's too high of an onboarding ramp. It would have a problem getting up that ramp. But if we redrew the onboarding ramp and maybe we drew it here, it probably would still be difficult. They might have to build, maybe put something else over here to make it more of a transition. But the idea, though, if you look at this, is what's the easiest thing that you can put down that people would say yes to? What's something you can think through of value that people would say yes to without much thought of resisting? And so I guess might be, oh yeah, I feel safe to say yes to a Facebook group. Or again, I've even used my podcast. Hey, are you willing to podcast? There'll be some free marketing for you, showcase your story. And then they're opted into something smaller. It increases the likelihood of them saying yes to something bigger down the line. Again, I don't see this as unethical, but it's just important that you know the principles so you can guard yourself against them if that time ever came. All right, let's keep it moving. And what I would say is, if your aim is to begin saying no. So let's say somebody was on like a Dave Ramsey and they're trying to save more money in their life. And so they are really focusing on the priority of not spending as much and saying no more. Then part of that is the principle of consistency reversed, is if you begin saying no to things earlier, you're going to increase the likelihood of you being able to say no to things later. Examples. Okay, so if you say yes to going into the store at the mall, then you're increasing the likelihood of you buying something, but you're trying not to buy something. Okay, well, don't go to the store. All right, well, don't go to the mall. Okay, so you said, okay, maybe you're the kind of person, you don't even shop at the mall anymore. And you're more of somebody who's going to shop at online. All right, well, don't go to the website anymore. The website is the consistency principle that's pulling you in. There's a reason, right? There's a whole other a different concept that's related, but also separate, which is it's called drip marketing. And the idea is when they get an email address of yours, they're sending you they're sending you email every so often to make you think about them, 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 and then to get to the website. So that consistency, you said yes to simply going to the website, increases the likelihood of you buying something from the website. So you can just take this principle. If you know that when people say yes to something smaller, it increases the likelihood of them saying yes to something bigger. And if your ambition in this season of life is to say no to more offers and to save more money, then you want to begin to say no very, very early on in the process to eliminate the opportunity for you to incidentally being persuaded to saying yes later in the process. This is one of those reasons that timeshare organizations, if you've ever been to a timeshare presentation, I know my wife and I went to one years ago, and this is before I even knew this principle. We went to a timeshare presentation years ago, and the way they had people sign up and go is they had a little kiosk in the middle of the mall, and they had somebody signing up with a clipboard. And what that person was doing was, hey, do you want to enter for an opportunity to win a free vacation? He takes everybody's names down. We put our names in. He calls us, tells us we won the free vacation, but we would first have to sit through a timeshare presentation at Canyon Lake. Again, think about it. They didn't try to sell the timeshare presentation at the kiosk in the mall. No. They aimed for you to first say yes, to opt in, to go to the Canyon Lake Resort, to be in that environment, to get you to say yes to something small, to go to Canyon Lake. And then they're going to use a bunch of the holistic tactics. Okay, now you're going to go in. Now, when you go over to the timeshare presentation, pay attention to all of the principles that we're going to go through today. So the one we already talked about, reciprocity, meaning they're going to try to give to you. That might be water. It's a bottle of water. That's popcorn. That's maybe a soda or a drink or whatever they're serving there. They're already working the principles of you're in the room, which means consistency. You're more likely to buy something now that you've said yes to going to Canyon Lake. And they are giving to you, they've given out popcorn or snacks or drinks. And now, so they're already working two of the six principles just there. Now, if you want to make sure you don't give into temptation and buy that timeshare, well, when you're at the mall and you find out that's what the program is, you say no up front to eliminate the possibility that you would buy a timeshare later on at Canyon Lake, even when initially especially if in the beginning you did not want to buy that timeshare. All right. Be sure to let me know if you have any questions. If you're watching the replay of this, let me know in the comments. Or if you're seeing it, if you're with it live, then go ahead and let me know in the comments. If you have any questions about the process, we've gone through 2 points. We want the reciprocity and consistency. I'm sharing these principles again to reiterate if you're in business and these principles apply to you. But also if you're just a consumer that you're trying to save more money or you're able to take more control over your life and you want less people to have influence over you, then you want to think about these principles in reverse and be mindful of how people want to use these principles to influence you and potentially manipulate you. Let's go into point number 3. Point number 3 is the principle of liking. Liking. There's 2 parts to this principle. Part 1 is you're more likely to be persuaded if you perceive the other people are like you, that they're similar to you. It's one part of liking. The other part of liking is, do you enjoy their company, their presence? Do you enjoy that connection? Do you enjoy interacting with them? So but let's talk about the first one in this context. I usually save the enjoyment, the people principles for an entire different lesson because it deserves that much time. In fact, my 4th book that I'm writing is about the people principles components, that making yourself not own. I mean, it gives you the best opportunity to be likable if you're practicing divine people principles. That's kind of that perspective. Now, what I do want us to focus on is to being like the people. And here's where I'll even tie in a scripture and to give you some of that divine perspective when it comes to influence. So let's look at this passage and we'll have some discussion about it. And we're going to go to in the good book, in the scripture, we're going to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And even if you're not Christian and you're not spiritual like this, I think there's still a lesson for you inside of it. So stay with me. So what we're about to read and get into is from one of the leaders of the early church, and he's aiming to help these people to understand like what it takes to help win as many as possible. And I'm going to point out some of the language he's using, but I'll go and read this section, and then I want to make this a universal principle that I think applies to this manipulation, to this persuasion element that's taught in the business world, but it's also right here in scripture as well. So let's read. We're going to read 1 Corinthians 9, 19 through 22. All right. Verse 19 says, "Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but I'm under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak. To win the weak, I become all things to all people, so that by all possible means, I might save some." Now, I want you to hone in on this concept. This is a leader in the early church writing about trying to help the people understand his approach and his passion for winning people to God and to winning people to Christ and to really to win them over. And the common thread is he starts off by serving, which it does actually feed into that reciprocity where we're talking about earlier. But then he talks about this other concept. To the Jews, I became like. Think about that. Became like them to win them. To those under the law, I became like one under the law to win them. Verse 21, to those that didn't have the law, I became like one not having the law, so as to win those not having the law. And then he talks about becoming weak to win the weak. He's become all things to all people for a purpose, so that by all possible means I might save some. So in his passion to bring people to Jesus, to get people right with God, to help people be forgiven, to help people go to heaven, to help people be transformed, his strategy was quite simple. It was become like the people. If he was going to persuade them into this lifestyle, into this transformation, he understood it was become like them. But they're different from me. They have a different religious background. We'll become like them. but this person is very religious. Come from this background. Okay, become like them. And so there's this divine principle of persuasion that he was sharing right here in this text. And when you also break down some of what the best salesmen do in their interactions with their customers and their clients, literally down to the body gesturing that we have. So if the customer has their arms crossed, then the salesman will cross their arms. If you're talking about your vacation to Hawaii, they'll talk about their vacation to Cancun. And you're building a similarity. If you brought your child to the timeshare presentation, they'll talk about their child to the timeshare presentation. Or they'll be talking about their child and how they're connected. And then they play around at the building as well. I remember specifically when I went to the timeshare presentation, I remember I was reading a C.S. Lewis book, and the salesman aimed to build that similarity with me. Oh, hey, I know about that book too. And I like the book Mere Christianity, or I like the book Screw Tape Letters. He's quoting and referencing that book to me. And as we had that conversation, now I look back and go, okay, I see what he was doing. He was trying to make that connection. Hey, we have this in common. Again, and that's a great people principle. John Maxwell teaches it in his book, Winning with People. He taught you find the 1% you agree on, and you focus 100% of your effort on the 1% you agree on. So the principle is to become like them, or to show yourself as similar to them. So how would you guard against this? And this is one of those where if somebody's relating to you, it could be one of the most powerful human experiences where somebody listens, they understand, they empathize, they can express with words with what you're feeling and experiencing. It could be very, very special, very, very powerful. Now, to be mindful that somebody could be using tactics like that to persuade or manipulate. Again, just to be aware of it. And that's why sometimes when these caricatures of people, when they're sharing about, this new relationship, oh, we have so much in common, right? So why is that so powerful? So they're saying they have so much in common, that commonality builds these special connections, and special connections leads to the persuasion. And if you're just aware that being a tool in their tool belt, it can make you less susceptible to that influence. If I was teaching this on the business side, I'll teach them all right, so what are some things everybody has? Okay, well, we all have weekends. We all have certain days off of work coming up, maybe in certain seasons. It doesn't mean we all have the same beliefs about the season. We might not all believe in Christmas or Thanksgiving or 4th of July or whatever it is. But we might have the same days coming up. I say, how are you spending your days off? And all of a sudden, then you're building this connection on shared experiences or the emotions of experience. Let's say I've never been to Disney World, but somebody talks about being excited about their experience. I can relate to the experience of being excited. Or if somebody has a lost loved one or some kind of loss in the family, well, you can relate to loss. And so this is all goes into the relating, the empathy, the sympathy. I've shared even in a couple of my books, or one if not two, or maybe even three of the books, this is the concept of breaking down the word sympathy. It's like the same feeling. There's something powerful in that. There's a scripture that calls us that. It's like First Peter 3 calls us to be sympathetic, to be similar or that same. And pathos, the Greek word pathos is feeling, to be the same feeling with people. Empathy is much more of a modern word, but it seems to have won the favor over sympathy. Same concepts, really. I'm not in favor of any of the delineations between the two, but same concept. Empathy, if you talk about embody or enter into that part of the word, and you pathos, it's like you're embodying the feeling. So anyway, all I would say, sympathy, empathy can be one way I would help somebody to become more persuasive, more influential in the market by using feelings. Feelings, we could relate to feelings. So there's plenty of things you could relate to in life. It might be the classic acronym for asking about these areas would be the word form, F-O-R-M, F, family. People can relate to family. Occupation. People can relate to working. Recreation. What do you do for fun, for leisure activity? The M stands for mission or your message. So those four are great places to start to build the commonality and common ground that builds trust that can potentially have somebody be more persuasive. All right. Let's see how we're doing. We are on point 1, 2, and 3. Let me see here. Oh, okay. I just realized something that changes the mix. I can't see comments on this presentation. So I think what I'm going to do today is leave it at those 3 points. Maybe we'll pick up on points 4, 5, and 6 tomorrow, because I tried a new way of doing it tonight, and I can't see if people are watching, or I can't see comments today. So let me bring it in for a landing, and then we'll try to do a better presentation of this tomorrow night when we go live. But if you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I promise I'm getting better at this live streaming. But I tried something new today, but I don't think it worked the way I wanted it to. So you all have a good night, and we'll see you on the next video. Peace.